stuff. Okay, so welcome to the recording studio. This is Graham. Say hi, Graham. And this is Cooper. Say hi, Cooper. Yes. And we are recording early this morning from an undisclosed location. And we're going to teach you all about recruiting and interviewing. Or not, depends on how much you listen. I would recommend that at this point when I pause that you probably put me on double speed and then go back and take notes. Anyway, say goodbye, Graham. Bye, Graham. Hello, my awesome students. Just reaching out to see how far I'm away from my microphone. The camera. Today we're going to talk a little bit about telecommuting policies and procedures. I have SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management, Telecommuting Policy and Procedure, possible or boilerplate language. All companies need to come up with it. Why is it not just so easy to say you can work from home? Well, I guess it depends on the job, really, what it entails. I know that Rowan has sent out several guidelines on working from home, one of which was you can't take your desktop computers home with you. I kind of felt sorry for those professors who, only used a desktop computer and weren't able to take it home with them. I don't know if felt sorry for is the right word or not, but there are policies with respect to equipment and time worked. If you're non-exempt versus an exempt employee, you still have to pay overtime if employees are working more than 40 hours. And how does somebody that may be a non-essential employee do the job as, say, an administrative assistant remotely? It's not extremely obvious how some jobs translate. And then how do you pay that person? Okay, so over here on the telecommuting policy and procedure, objective basically is to say, hey, you can maybe work part-time or all the time from a satellite location if it's viable and flexible, and it still applies to the basic policies and procedures that the company has already in place. I remember at Citibank, some employees wanted to work one day or occasionally from the house, and that was a very difficult policy to administer. How did you select it? Always when those employees worked from home, it was they weren't available. They took that advantage. They took advantage of the situation to work whatever hours they might wanted to have worked, or have their dogs and children playing in the background, when in fact we really didn't have a policy where they could do anything at any time that they wanted from their home workplace. It was a stretch at the time, but I think certainly with this COVID-19 intervention or pandemic, we have learned as a profession a lot about telecommuting and how people can do it, and how what we used to consider truly problematic, like, oh, they have to take care of their dog, or I'm talking to them and their dog's barking, or their kids are there, it's not really as much of an issue as we used to think that it was. So there's a possible procedure. Any telecommuting could be done on a trial basis. Again, sometimes it's the job, sometimes it's the person. And often, as with this policy, sometimes you just go out and say, hey, we've got a pandemic, everybody needs to work, and it's a temporary basis. Even when you allow people to work from the house or their home or telecommute because of a pandemic or an emergency, you still have to put an envelope around that. So who can work from the house? Is their job eligible? For example, Alice, my wife, is a nurse. Her job, most of the time as a nurse, she has to be there. But the other time, she's a nurse manager, and there's a possibility that she could take meetings or other things from the house. But none of her staff that she supervises can work from the home. So it's really not as convenient as somebody, say, Brooke, my daughter, who works for Adobe and manages the Microsoft Adobe account in San Francisco most of the time, but stays in Salt Lake City, could much more easily work from the house. Equipment used to be that we had to set up an office for them with a fax line and even pay for internet or a phone. Those things are understood now that people basically use their own phone and their own internet systems. Again, I was saying that Rowan, and it's kind of seems strange to me that if they have a box top or a desktop computer, it wouldn't work from somebody's house. So there are certain problems. Can you use that person's home computer? What if on their home work computer there's confidential information? And basically we don't allow people into our systems because of confidentiality that would allow a breach or attack. So they can't really sign in from their home computer to work across their own systems. Safety, we're still maintaining safety. We have now unemployment. But workers' comp, what if somebody gets hurt? Say that I go out here in a few minutes and mow my grass during my working hours and I cut my hand off. Or, that probably could be not workers' comp, but say I stand up here in a minute and I fall over backwards over my chair. Is that workers' comp covered? Because maybe the chair was broken and it was my fault as an individual. Let's see what else there may be on that. That looks like it's all on that page. I'm going to pause the video for a minute. All right, here's an interesting video, apparently.
Regardless of how long
Something
it's been
that you don't do during a
few
Zoom
years or
teleconference.
whatever.
Watch
It
this
really
lady
depends on
on
just,
the left
ethical
here. I
standards
think
of the
most
profession.
some of
In
you probably
reality,
already
I've heard
seen
that
this
social work kind of
via Facebook
very
or
high
me.
standards,
She
and-
just,
and,
goes to the bathroom while
good
she's on the video
standards in
call.
terms
Look
of
at
things,
these other
and that
people
oftentimes
react.
People don't, people of other professions don't have.
This is too
Yeah,
funny.
hold on. What happened?
I saw nothing.
Oh my God, Jennifer.
It's cracking me up. So I remember once this was years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, before teleconferencing or anything was that critical, and I was working out of San Antonio, but I was home, and they had called me in the morning, and I was a little bit later than maybe I should have been, but I was, I don't know, it was a 9 o'clock conference call, 7 o'clock my time, and I took a shower and I was listening to the call and went to the sink and then somehow unmuted it. And then I was at the sink shaving, and the person, my boss that was on the call, she said, "Oh, what is that noise? What, is somebody have a bowl of water that they're playing in the water? What's going on?" It really bothered her, and she tried to call me out on this phone call with all of my peers across the country. And it's like, that was just a little bit of an oops, but why was she so critically? And I just kind of remuted it and played innocent. Oh, I remember one other time, she'd had a lot of conference calls. I was after work my time, and I had stopped by a store to pick something up. So I was walking along the store, and I tried to make a comment on the call. And the second I hit the button, this announcement came over the speakers, clean up on aisle 5. I was so embarrassed because it was so obvious that I wasn't sitting in an office maybe where they thought that I should have been. And anyway, that was an interesting teleconference problem that I have had in the past. All right, Zoom is a great way to do teleconferencing. It's a very popular, I think stock is even way up. People are using it almost exclusively, I think. We use WebEx. WebEx is also a good platform, but a lot of meetings that you will or HR people will have online are going to go through Zoom. So you might want to take a look at some of the tips on how to do a Zoom meeting, how to record one, how to share documents. You can transfer files, do chats. So you should be very familiar, and hopefully this week you'll have an assignment, a quiz that will walk you through, and not walk you through, but ask you to do some research on how to set up a Zoom or an online meeting, which will be critical during a telecommuting scenario. This is an interesting article I just found on Money Magazine. While most people dream of working from the house in their pajamas, I know that one of my sons that works out of this house is not really happy. He likes to leave. He likes the interaction, the social ability to work. He's on an internship in an accounting firm. And of course, actually went to the office a couple of times last week because nobody else was there. But he doesn't really have a home office. He's got the two kids running around, Graham and Cooper, who are so cute, and Dobby, the dog. But working from the house, especially if you're a young professional, it's difficult to communicate with everybody. You don't see people walking down the hall. You can't put your head into their office or their cubicle. I've noticed that if I work remotely, even if I'm not in the headquarters office and I'm not in an office near my boss, it's much more difficult to get career advancement and career advancement opportunities. You're just not there. You're just not in person. I think it's a bias, and it certainly plays out. Poor relationships, telecommuters find it difficult to form relationships with others. There's that social need that we have. The loss of culture. What else does this say? You never ending schedule. I'm looking at my coworker now, who's another son is an investment banker out of San Francisco, who was here till 6 o'clock this morning working. He's working on a deal, but a lot of times with telecommuters, or even people in the tech industry and others, that they find that they're always supposed to be available via a text or a phone call. So whereas you have some flexibility, you're never really off the clock. All right, so those are a few thoughts on telecommuting. There'll be a quiz associated with them and a few more readings for this week. All right, I hope you have a great week. Stay safe.